Smart Wool Merino base layers are so comfortable. They're the first thing you'll want to put on and the last thing you'll want to take off, no matter where you're at or where you're going. Because feeling good is the best way to keep you doing you. Smart Wool base layers, the most essential, versatile, and comfortable clothing for anything, anywhere. Shop base layers or find a local retailer at smartwool.com. Smartwool. Go far. Feel good.
This episode is brought to you by GMC. The new GMC 2024 Sierra Heavy Duty features the first ever Sierra HD Denali Ultimate, offering an enhanced 6.6-liter Duramax Turbo Diesel V8 to deliver turbocharged towing capability. Taking premium capability to amazing new places. Available spring of 2023. Visit gmc.com to learn more.
This episode is brought to you by Smart Food. There are a bunch of ways to be smart during the holiday season. Getting the shopping done early, not sitting your aunt next to your mom, and snacking on Smart Food popcorn. It's air pop popcorn tossed in delicious white cheddar cheese or sweet and salty kettle corn. You are what you eat. Welcome to the Smart Club. Shop now at snacks.com.
Welcome back to the Love Tennis Podcast with me, James Gray of iNews.co.uk and the iNewspaper. As always, I'm joined by George Bellshaw, the tennis writer, and live from the National Tennis Centre in Roehampton, Calvin Betton, our resident tennis coach who is deep in pre-season mode. I'm sure he's sent his lads out on a 2-hour run in the snow. Have you sent them out in the snow, Calvin, for a character-building day of pre-season?
There was some talk of a Rocky IV style S&C camp first thing this morning. I know that what I did think, so I actually had to walk up from Barnes Station to the National Tennis Centre last night when the snow was at its peak. And my only thought for the whole 20-minute walk was this camp used to be held in effing Miami. And yeah, it was there's actually there's a park. If anyone's walked to the National Tennis Centre from Barnes Station, there's a park and a pathway through the park. They advise you not to go through there at night because there has been some muggings. And I normally wouldn't for that reason, but then it does add about 10 minutes onto your journey. And I thought, as I looked, I was at the crossroads of whether to do it or not. And I thought, you know what? If there's any muggers out in this weather, fair play. They can have my phone and my wallet and
see if they can make it home.
Yeah.
George, what have you been stuck in the snow today, or did you wisely stay at home?
Yeah, so I woke up at about 7:30 this morning, had a shower, and as I was, just before the shower, I put my phone just like to update the train times, got out the shower, looked at the train times, decided there was absolutely no point me venturing out the house because it was all so messed up. And I just went back to bed for another hour and then cracked on.
Yeah, I rather wished I had made that same decision. I walked 10 minutes to the second nearest train station because there are more and quicker trains there. And as I walked down the steps to it, the woman said, "You wanting a train?" And I was like, well, yeah, that's why I'm in the train station. And she said, well, there aren't any. And I was like, right, okay. So anyway, it took me 2 hours to do a 45-minute commute.
It did kind of hammer home the point that if that had happened like 5 years ago, what happened this morning, I'd have just had to traipse in for like 2 or 3 hours rather than just make the very sensible decision. I can do exactly what I wanted to do, just sat in my bedroom today, so I'm going to do that instead. So
taxpayer dollar working hard there, ladies and gentlemen. If you're in the UK,
well, they got
you
more
pay
out
George's
of me.
salary.
If I'd have been travelling 3 hours, I wouldn't have been bloody working as long as I did today. They could have dealt with it. So they got a good 9-hour day out of me.
Sure thing. Right, let's move on to some actual tennis, shall we? We're going to do our awards today. We're going to go through and have a look back at what's been... and actually going through this today made me realise that 2022 has been an utterly bonkers year of tennis and non-tennis and just everything. We'll talk about all that and more. We'll also talk a little bit about Nick Kyrgios. I'm sure we'll talk lots about Nick Kyrgios in all sorts of ways, but he's been talking on Twitter. And maybe this is actually the best place to start because it's the most current, and it brings in one of our favourite things, which is revamping the ranking system. Nick Kyrgios, people may have seen on Twitter, I think yesterday his time, or maybe, as regular readers and listeners will know, I do not deal well with time zones, so I can't work out what time it was where Nick Kyrgios currently is, especially as I think he might be in Saudi Arabia at the moment. But anyway, he quote retweeted something that showed he was number 2 in the UTR rating system, which is an alternative ranking system, just behind Novak Djokovic, just ahead of Daniil Medvedev. And he quote retweeted it and said, "I've said it before, the current ranking system is based on consistency and how much you play, not skill and form." And then 4 face palming emojis. If you're interested in the UTR ranking, as I say, it's Djokovic, Kyrgios, Medvedev, Auger-Aliassime, Nadal, Fritz, Alcaraz, Tsitsipas, Zverev, Rune. That is the top 10 in order. I don't know where to start with this. I tell you what, I'll start with what I said in replies on Twitter to him, which I said, consistency is also important in tennis. Skill and form are important, but repeating that over time is consistency and reinforces proof of that skill and form. George, you're always someone who wants to rewrite the way things are done. Do you like the current ranking system? Is Nick Kyrgios right?
I mean, he's... I kind of do like some of the principles of the UTR ranking as a whole. Like, I do think it does weight certain matches and certain players and kind of rank that more realistically. Like, we've spoken a little bit before, you know, I'm not saying there shouldn't be a blanket ranking system for winning a Grand Slam, but you can win a Grand Slam via a much easier route than other people have won a Grand Slam. You know, we've spoken about Raducanu, who's Grand Slam win. As good as that was, and as hard as it is to do that, you know, the path she went through was, you know, significantly easier than other Grand Slams you'll see based on kind of ranking or pedigree of opponent. So, you know, that happens in tennis all the time, not at Grand Slam level, but every other tournament as well. You know, your ranking is dependent not only on how well you play all year, although that is obviously a big factor, but who you draw over the year. You know, you can have four first round matches at ATP 250 level and draw world number 1 to 5 in those 4 weeks or whatever, and it might not go well. Or you could draw world number 55 every week in those, you know, and you get the same number of points by beating those lot as you would by if you beat, you know, 3 or 4 top 10 players to get to the same stage. So I can see the argument around why weighted rankings in that sense is a useful thing. However, I think your point about consistency is important as well. And, you know, you still have to be going out and doing it all the time. And I still struggle to see any way around our current ranking system that's significantly better than the one we've got at the moment. But maybe there's a happy medium where you get 1,000 points for winning a slam, and then you can jump it up to 2,000 or 3,000 weighted on who you beat. Who knows? I don't know.
Well, just for people who don't know how the UTR... I mean, people know how the current ranking system works, right? It's all the points you've earned from your best... Is it 17 qualifying tournaments over the last 12 months? Am I right? I got that number right, George? 17?
It might be 18.
Yeah, anyway, it's in that region. UTR is a bit like what they use in chess to calculate your rating in that, what they call ELO rating, where it is calculated on who you beat, actual performance versus expectation. So if you play someone with a higher UTR, even if you lose, actually, if you lose by less than expected, your UTR goes up. If you play someone with the same UTR as you and you beat them, it will go up. And if you play someone with a lower UTR and you beat them by more than the UTR expected you to, yours will also go up. And by the same token, if you win by a smaller margin or you lose, then obviously it will go down. I think it's based on your last 30 eligible match scores from the last 12 months. Now, there's quite a reasonable argument that, like, you're 15, well, maybe you're 17 best, and if you're not playing that, but 30 matches over the last 12 months is still, like, quite a significant period of time. Like, if you're picking and choosing tournaments, as Kyrgios says he wants to do, then it's still, like, probably going to be 7 or 8 months of tennis. And I don't know how weighted it is towards recency. That the algorithm isn't like fully played out. But to quote the Universal Tennis's own blog, what's the best way to improve my rating? 1, compete well. You can improve your rating by winning more games than expected, or play when you play higher or lower opponents. Play often. The more matches you play, the quicker your rating will reflect your current form. It is also best to play against opponents who are close to your rating. And be patient. Since UTR is a rolling weighted average, the effect of new results is slightly lagged. Your rating may take time to reflect a recent outcome. So, Calvin, it strikes me that Nick Kyrgios wants the ranking system that currently shows him to be the highest rank that he thinks he is.
Yeah, I'd say a couple of things on it, because now he's number 2, which means it's going to be difficult for him to... He's number 2 on the UTR system. It means it's going to be difficult for him to pick up significant... To go much higher, unless he's going to start beating Novak Djokovic regularly. And I guarantee you, when he slips down, he'll decide that the UTR is rubbish, and then he'll probably go up in the ATP rankings. He'll start saying now that's the best ranking system. Anyway, the problem is where it's skewed with Kyrgios and where you can't read too much into it. I found the top 10 list quite interesting, actually. But where it's skewed with Kyrgios is that he doesn't play on his worst surface. And it doesn't factor that in, so it doesn't. Where you would normally balance out on an overall ranking system is you're playing on all the surfaces. He just doesn't play on clay. So if for example he wouldn't be number 2 in the world if Carlos Alcaraz didn't play on grass, or if Daniil Medvedev didn't play on clay, which he doesn't like. Or if Rafa Nadal, to be fair to him, has played a lot of matches this year when he just hasn't been in great shape. He probably shouldn't have been at the US Open, and that kind of thing. He shouldn't have been at a lot of tournaments, but he went to play them. If Nadal hadn't played all those tournaments and taken losses to people when he shouldn't really have been playing there, Nadal would probably be number 2 in the world. So it's just a freak occurrence has happened with Kyrgios that has got him there, which the UTR system I'm a big fan of, as I've said numerous times on here, and it's a system that you can't normally beat, but in a short period of time he's found a way to beat it purely by a lot of players have played matches. Well, certain players have played matches when they probably shouldn't have, and he just has chosen not to play the matches where he's least likely to win.
In his defense, I highly doubt he had the forethought to mastermind the beating of the UTR.
No, I'm sure he didn't, but he did. He just doesn't play on clay. And how it works, that if he, as he's, he's got quite a high UTR, as we've seen there, if he played a full clay court season, that would drop significantly because he'd be taking losses to players who the UTR deems are below him. And he wouldn't be winning those matches. He wouldn't be winning those matches, so it would affect his points negatively. And for somebody who tanks a lot, the score lines would become a big issue for him. If he loses a tiebreak in the first set, then just sacks off the second set totally, he's going to start dropping quick.
Not to launch too much of a defense of Kyrgios on this, but I mean, on the kind of surface point as a whole, I mean, there's lots of people who are Federer, Nadal, Djokovic fans who would argue, well, Federer's always been disadvantaged, and I suppose you put Kyrgios in this bracket because he doesn't get a long enough amount of the season to play on his favourite surface, which is grass, whereas Djokovic has always had, 8 months of the season to play on hard, and Nadal gets a really long clay season compared to the grass. But
then
does that skew the rankings at all in terms of like hitting people's favourites?
No, because you didn't get Federer going, oh well, the ATP rankings are crap. You should all be looking at the UTR because that shows that I'm the second best player in the world. And they played a whole season. It's not about favourite surfaces or not favourite surfaces. They played a whole season, and that's where you get the best player in the world. You play a whole season, and that's where you get it. He hasn't played a whole season.
Yeah, I'm saying more about people getting advantages in the rankings. Like, have we damaged, say, the big servers' ability to climb the rankings by not kind
of probably. But I'd say that
taking out those quick surfaces. I'm just saying there's different ranking implications by things that are wider than just the rankings, if that makes sense.
I mean, I'd say with Kyrgios, it must be close to about 40% of his matches on UTR are on grass.
Yeah, not far off.
Because he's played 7 at Wimbledon, and he played 1 before that, didn't he?
Did he play in Marbella? I think.
Yeah,
he played
so
in
7.
Marbella.
So he's got. So that's what 13 matches he's going to have. Sorry, 12 of his 30 matches are going to have been on grass.
I think to kind of move this on a little bit, I wonder, and George, you probably the closest man to getting inside Nick Kyrgios' head, if you'll forgive me that accusation. Do you think? Why do you think he's so concerned about the rankings? Is it just an ego thing? Because he's never concerned about anything else in tennis. He's much more concerned about the NBA power rankings.
Well, I think there's a degree of, he constantly says, I'm definitely top 5, top 10 player in the world. I think he genuinely just has this, inflated. Well, whether you call it inflated or not, he's obviously incredibly talented and talent-wise probably is top 5, top 10 in the world. But, it's always that question of talent versus hard work for Kyrgios, isn't it? And it's almost like he doesn't want lesser talented players to be rewarded because they turn up every week and they put the hard graft in, which, someone who likes Kyrgios a lot is a bit unfair because that's not how life works. There are, talent is one half of the equation, hard work and graft's the other half, and Kyrgios doesn't turn up enough. So I don't really understand how he can sit around complain. He can complain about the rankings this year based on not getting his Wimbledon points. Don't get me wrong, that's a significant issue, and that would have him a lot higher in the rankings. I'm not sure where that would take him, probably just outside the top 10 or something. But yeah, I think that can be his only gripe, to be honest, in terms of the rankings this year.
He also doesn't understand, and we've covered this before, he doesn't understand that rankings are not supposed to gauge what someone's top level is. Like, they're not supposed to gauge what a player can do. They're supposed to gauge what a player does do regularly throughout a year. If it was what they can do, right, for about 4 years before he got injured, Juan Martín del Potro would have been number 1 in the world. Because if you took what he can do, if he played the best he possibly can all the time, he was better than everybody in that period. But there's no sport in the world where the ranking system do that. There's not one. Like, it's not like a football league. It's not like you go, Man City are top, and then say, I don't know, Newcastle beat somebody 7-0, and you go, they're clearly the best. We'll give them the league title.
To be fair, the boxing rankings run by the corrupt bodies that run boxing are pretty awful. But
it's the only sport that doesn't have a governing body, though, isn't it? Like,
yeah, well, exactly. And I take your point. I suppose it comes back to, and I don't want to get too philosophical about this, but what are the rankings for? Like, what do we want the rankings to be for, George?
Well, I'd pull it out even further, James, and say, what do we want the game to be about, and how do we want to take the game forward? And for me, I would love to see the game where we have the best players play each other more
Calvin's
regularly.
Response to that question is to take his headphones off and walk across the room.
That was unbelievable.
I think his laptop is running out of charge, but that's my
Robin.
favourite reaction to George, like opening up a can of worms that I've ever seen. Calvin, you just missed us. Very funny that George said, "What do we want tennis to be about?" And
I heard that. Yeah,
but then you just walked away.
We just walked off.
You were done. Calvin wants tennis to be about short and sweet. I mean, I tell you what, George. It's an interesting question, right? Because I kind of had this thought process a little bit today because of something else I was covering, which is this snooker thing. People may have seen 7 snooker players have been suspended for match fixing. Yan Bingtao, the world number 16, being the most high profile, which is pretty significant. And I've been thinking a lot about gambling lately and what sport is for, what's the point. Pickleball's creating a global tour, and I was like, why? It's a terrible sport to watch. Like, why would you not just have people play it and make it one of those sports that isn't really professional, it's just really popular? And I suppose we want people to like watching the sport so that they want to play it, so that they lead a healthier and more enriched lifestyle. I think that's what I think I want tennis to be. I want it to be something that people want to be involved in, and in order for that to work, it needs to be accessible. So I think the ranking system needs to be accessible.
Well,
I think,
I agree.
Sorry, George, you go first.
So I was just going to say, I suppose the point I was going to make before Calvin kind of ran off was in terms of, like, if I were to kind of critique tennis at the minute as, like, and I mean very top level professionalism and what's not happening enough, it is this kind of big build up of people and big matches and being able to preview big matches and kind of having more time where you can prepare to be like, oh crap, 2 weeks till Nadal's playing Djokovic to end the year as the world's best player. Do you know what I mean? Like, I think tennis lacks a significantly good storyline sometimes outside of the Grand Slams, which are by themselves their own social events. So if you're asking me what the rankings could serve a purpose for, it would be, probably a more forced way of having like a league table or something. I've spoken about this before. I kind of would love the idea of there being a proper top 10 league table where they have to play a league match every month or something, and you can pick the fixtures out throughout the year or something. That's the sort of thing I would quite like to see, where you then have this longer ability to build up to a fixture rather than a tournament. I think there's so many arguments around the number of tournaments and how many people are playing, and the actual ecosystem of tennis. Like, if you reduce tournaments, you reduce the number of people you can actually give money to and give a job to and give the opportunity to succeed in tennis. So it's not like a simple thing. I just think there's a little bit more creative stuff that could be done at the very top of the game for the very, very elite. I mean, the top 10, where you just come up with some sort of fun system that allows you that kind of big name presence, grows a few more profiles, get a few more people looking at the sport like, God, I want to be like so-and-so. And I think that sort of approach might become more prevalent in this next era, where it's not necessarily as obvious where those mega stars are going to come from, both from a kind of consistency and a marketing perspective.
I think, one of the reasons what the rankings for, they're to determine who gets in the tournaments. Like, you can't, that's the most straightforward one. And also, I do think there's a bit of a story. I get asked a lot of the time by my mates who don't follow tennis. We'll talk about something, and then they go, oh, what ranking is he then? People like to know, when they're often surprised that a lot of people were surprised that Federer wasn't in the top 10. They still see him has been in that. And you go, well, he's not in the top 10 because he hasn't played, and there are 10 better players than him.
And you're right, like, every time there is a match, any tournament, the ranking's a big part of the conversation. If the world number 100 beats the world number 1, that's the story in itself, isn't it? So that number does play a role. I don't know. There's so many things.
But you have, the reason you have to have a ranking, right? Sport is the last thing that we have in life that is a pure meritocracy. The players who are the best will become the number that you'll be. Get my tongue tied here. You will get to, if you're the best player in the world, you will get to world number 1. Or if you're the best team in the world, you'll be the best. You'll win whatever it is.
If your sport is a true meritocracy, I would argue there are a few that aren't.
No, but sport. Should I say that wrong? Sorry, James. Sport should be the last meritocracy that we have, and many sports, and I'd say tennis is. Tennis is the last merit. Tennis is a true meritocracy. You will always reach your potential in tennis.
Probably caveat it within once you're in the right ecosystem. So getting into the system in the first place is a big challenge. Like, if you're born in the wrong country, for example,
right at the sort of like super granular level. But if you
can't afford to play and fund it, you're not from the right association.
I say many times, it's like, if they can't afford to play stuff, and there's nobody who argues that kind of thing more than me. But if you're as good, if you're that good, somebody will find you that will give you some money to do it. If you display all of the traits that you need to be a professional player.
Yeah, I mean, it's difficult, isn't it? Because, Calvin, you may have seen some examples of although from your point of view, I suspect you haven't, of players who had that, talent and not been able to fulfill it. But I think very rarely the opportunity to play the game, as you say, George, maybe isn't always there. But as you say, once you get to a certain level,
I've seen it, and at the times, I've been frustrated. I coached a player who's phenomenally talented and from a very poor background, and I got frustrated at the time that we didn't have the money to send him places. But then, as time went on, I realized he's not really doing everything he should be to do that. He's not really putting the effort in that he should do to do that. And if he would have done that, then I think somebody would have stepped up and given him some money. But other than talent, people need to show some more. And I've been the opposite side. You look at Paul Jubb, who had no money, a tragic story, but he worked and he worked and he worked, and somebody, whether it be LTA helped him out, and then a college helped him out, and he got there in the end. If that shows that tennis is really a meritocracy in that situation, that if you're good enough and you're willing to put the work in, there is a route for you anywhere.
Big questions, big conversations. I like it when we.
This went beyond the UTR a little bit, didn't it?
No, but this is my point. In that, this is what winds me up, I guess, about Nick Kyrgios. That tennis, as we say, sport should be a meritocracy, and he's almost suggesting he doesn't want it to be. That he should decide who the world number one is, and he should decide. We should just. What is his view that we should just go on opinion? Somebody just decides. That's how it used to work. To be fair, in like the NCAA with the college football, basically teams would just play a load of what were essentially friendly matches, and then at the end of the year, a committee would decide who the NCAA champions were. And that's how it used to be.
Yeah, wild. Let's move on. We're going to do our awards, I think, in the second half. We've got some good emails this week that I wanted to read out and put to you two. We've had an email from Mark, who calls himself Dr. Handsome, from sunny Darwin in Australia. Loving the pod more and more with each listen. Calvin's soft voice soothes my sweaty Darwin-weathered ears each time I listen to his wonderful insights. Keep up the good work, lad. Tell you what, if you ever go to Darwin, Calvin, I think you've got somewhere to stay. Question for you all. What has caused Steph Tsitsipas to be so disliked? And actually, I had someone DMing me this exact question. Liam Filer, who I know is a listener as well, was DMing me about this one. Every platform I listen to or read is hating on him. I assume his 1970s hairstyle has something to contribute to it. I'm a big Fed fan, so that 2019 Australian Open defeat still burns me, so I'm not a fan. I mean, I think we all understand that Stefanos Tsitsipas is not super well liked. George, do you want to take a punt at why?
I mean, I wouldn't say I dislike Tsitsipas, to be honest. I think he's a different guy. I mean, are we talking disliked on the tour or disliked publicly? Or
I mean, I think probably public perception.
Probably. I mean, he could pick a fight with a wall, couldn't he? That doesn't really help his occasion. And there's been some things around gamesmanship, but there are plenty of people who seem to lap up his terrible tweets that he's clearly just copying and pasting from other Twitter accounts.
I don't know about plenty. Like
there's a lot.
Like all high-profile people, like he has fans, of course he does, and they are vocal. But surely there are a lot more people who are like, oh, I quite like Novak Djokovic, sort of nonplussed about almost everyone else, but that Stefanos Tsitsipas guy, he's a weirdo. That's what it is for me. I think it's because people think he's a weirdo and they can't relate to him. And he does come across as a bit of a brat sometimes, and like falling out with his dad and falling out with his mum.
I think he was actually quite popular when he started, though. And this is the funny thing. I don't think it's been like there's naturally something you dislike about Tsitsipas. I think it's grown as people have got to know him more, if that makes sense. Like I think when he was first playing, like he played quite a fun brand of tennis. People seemed to be quite excited by him, and there was less of this what I'd describe as nonsense. Aware that I quite enjoy the nonsense as a kind of Machiavellian spirit. I think people are going to dislike him more and more because he's not fulfilling his potential, which I think does just bother some people naturally when they watch the sport, where it's like, well, why are you focusing on all this nonsense when you're not actually improving your game, if that makes sense. Yeah, I don't think I always still view him as fairly harmless in the view of people. Like, I don't think he's like someone people should really, really hate, in my opinion.
The Douglas Adams verdict on that one, mostly harmless. Calvin, people have heard your views on Stefan Tsitsipas quite a lot, so I'm going to ask you a second question, again from Mark from Mark Your Ceremony, Darwin's premier and most handsome marriage celebrant. From Down Under, Dr. Handsome says, will Rude actually ever win a slam, or has he just been filling the hole as a moderately good player whilst the big boys have been preoccupied? What's his weapon? I can't see one. What do you think, Calvin?
Again, it's one of those where I wouldn't say definitely he's not going to win a slam. If you were to ask me where my money is now, I'd probably say most likely not. But it wouldn't surprise me if he does, because strange things happen in slams. over the course of 2 weeks. And, if you only need one where, say, Alcaraz is injured, Djokovic doesn't play it, or as another, his brain melts when he whacks the ball at an umpire or something. And then who would you say is the favourite? You then basically got 7 or 8 names in a bag and go, well, one of those is going to win it. And he's as much chance as any of those, I think. But I think he's going to, I think next year would be when he's probably going to have to do it, because I think after that, you're into an era where Alcaraz will be really stepping up. I think Felix is going to move now, I would think. Sinner will get better. Medvedev, you would think he's going to come back to some sort of form. So I think, next year if he's going to... And also Ruud is probably playing the best he's going to play right now.
Yeah, just to kind of build on that point, I mean, if you look at Ruud at this US Open final, it was, okay, Alcaraz is someone we think is really, really going to be number one and dominant. It was pretty possible from Alcaraz's previous matches that he wasn't going to get there. It could easily have been Francis Tiafoe or Yannick Sinner in the final. And, I think they're both as good as Casper Ruud, but I wouldn't have been sat there perfectly saying Casper Ruud definitely can't win that match as a kind of one-off against inexperienced players who, haven't had that some experience. So, there are going to be draws in the next 2 years where they open up and they go mad because Nadal won't be fit enough and Djokovic will be banned, and, well, hopefully not. Hopefully that's just all sorted and we can brush that incident under the rug. But, as Calvin says, Alcaraz is the one, but you've heard my views about next year. I'm not convinced he's going to win a slam next year. So, and that's the unfiltered view you're going to get from me today.
George is trailing something there, which I can't tell you about yet, but there's a little Easter egg. If you're still listening, just at the end of the first half, think about what George has just said and remember that I warned you in a couple of weeks' time. After the break, we're going to be talking our awards. We'll be looking at the ATP and the WTA, and we'll also be thinking about our match of the year and our biggest disappointment too.
Smart wool merino base layers are so comfortable. They're the first thing you'll want to put on and the last thing you'll want to take off, no matter where you're at or where you're going. Because feeling good is the best way to keep you doing you. Smart wool base layers, the most essential, versatile, and comfortable clothing for anything, anywhere. Shop base layers or find a local retailer at smartwool.com. Smartwool. Go far. Feel good.
This episode is brought to you by GMC. The new GMC 2024 Sierra Heavy Duty features the first ever Sierra HD Denali Ultimate, offering an enhanced 6.6-liter Duramax Turbo Diesel V8 to deliver turbocharged towing capability. Taking premium capability to amazing new places. Available spring of 2023. Visit gmc.com to learn more.
Is inflation taking a bite out of your grocery budget? Andrews Federal Credit Union is here to help. Introducing our Inflation Buster Share Certificate with 5% APY for 7 months now through December 14th. Bring your money to Andrews Federal Credit Union today. The Inflation Buster account must be open with new money. Andrews Federal Credit Union membership is not just for the military. We also serve the community. Visit andrewsfcu.org.
Federally insured by NCUA. Membership eligibility required. APY equals annual percentage yield. Must have $1,000 minimum balance to earn advertised APY.
Here at the famous Sloping Pitch podcast, we're following the greatest show on earth. But would you like pitch-side seats for all the action in Qatar? The heat, the goals, the drama? Well, so would we. But why not join me, Nick Hancock, in Stoke-on-Trent and co-host Chris England in London's SW16? Every game live from England. The famous Sloping Pitch podcast. We think this tournament could be okay.
Sport Social.
Welcome back to the Love Tennis podcast with me, James Gray, and Calvin Betton and George Bellshaw. Who else? Can't believe I nearly forgot everyone's names there. I'll blame it on it being late at night and very cold. We're going to do our awards for the season. The WTA just today, I think, announced all their winners. I think the ATP winners are not yet out, George. I'm not quite sure, but it doesn't matter because we're going to do the Love Tennis podcast awards, and that's much more important to most of these nominees, I know for sure. We're going to do across the two tours: Player of the Year, Most Improved, Newcomer, Comeback, Coach, which are, of course, the official categories. And we're also going to do 2 of our own Match of the Year and Biggest Disappointment, and that's a very broad category. And probably the one we're going to talk about the most. We're almost certainly going to rattle through this faster than we would ever like to, but that is the nature of the beast. We're going to start with the big one. It's Player of the Year, and we'll start with the WTA. We've got a group of randomly assigned nominees. There isn't any rhyme or reason to exactly how many nominees we have for each award. It's really just, well, like I said, it's random. It's important to be random. Stops kidnappers catching up with you. Iga Swiatek, Ons Jabeur, Coco Gauff, Jessica Pegula, Elena Rybakina and Caroline Garcia are our nominees for Player of the Year. I think we might try and talk around this and then just end up agreeing on one answer, but we might as well try. George, I think you should have to make a case for anyone but Iga Swiatek.
I knew that was going to be your question. I knew I was going to really struggle.
I mean, there really isn't an obvious.
There is not a case. There's not a case. I mean, like, if you look at the Slam winners this year, there was Swiatek, Rybakina. Who won the other one?
Ashley Barty.
Ashley Barty. Oh, crikey, yeah. I was like, oh my God, where's the other Slam winner on this list? Is she retired? Okay, yeah.
I guess the only other case you can make is Ons Jabeur, right? Because she made 2
but even
Slam
then,
finals.
I mean, yeah, but like, I feel like you could make a case more for, well, I don't know, make a case more for a Slam, but no one's won more titles than her. There's really no category I'm looking at where I'm thinking it shouldn't be Swiatek, which isn't the case on the men's side, by the way. There's definitely more interesting categories in that one. But this is so clear cut. I'm not even sure I can come up with a faux argument for this because she has been the best, won the most slams, won the most tournaments, I imagine. Yeah. She is definitely the best this year, unfortunately.
Just to rattle through some of Iga Swiatek's stats this year, she has won a total of 8 titles. That's 8 out of 17 tournaments that she entered, which is a hit rate of, well, just under 50%, as you can imagine. Her total win-loss was 67-9. That's 88% win percentage. She won 4 of the WTA 1000 tournaments, 2 Grand Slams, as you mentioned. She did lose in the semi-finals of WTA finals, which might be the only blot on her copybook. I mean, Calvin, have you got even anything for me?
No, you can't go with anyone else. It'd be silly, wouldn't it? No, she's by miles. She's as close to dominating as you can get without, you would say, absolutely dominating the women's game.
Without actively being Steffi Graf.
Yeah, you can't say that she absolutely dominated because she only won 2 out of the 4 slams, and there was the odd tournament that she didn't win, but yeah, it was close to it.
Just a stat you left out there, James, that I'd almost forgotten about before reading it earlier because it feels so long ago. But she had a 37 match win streak this year.
Yeah.
I mean, that's pretty mental, like in terms of length. You don't get too many longer than that. So yeah, only one winner here.
Yeah. I'd be amazed if anyone gives WTA Player of the Year to anyone but Iga Swiatek. Well deserved, and I think I'll come on to this in Biggest Disappointment. It's Swiatek related. People can maybe guess what I'm going to come up with. ATP Player of the Year, 4 nominees here. We've got Carlos Alcaraz, Rafael Nadal, Novak Djokovic, and Casper Ruud. We've obviously got all the Grand Slam winners there, and all the Grand Slam finalists bar 2 as well, actually. Calvin, I mean, the obvious choice is to say Rafa Nadal with 2 Grand Slam victories, but there's plenty of case to be made elsewhere, I'm sure.
Yeah, I think because he won, if you take those 2 Grand Slam victories, he didn't do a great deal else. And that's that I would say is why I don't think for me it's Nadal. I think it was, if I look back in 5 years' time and think who stood out this year, it'd be Alcaraz. I think it was his year. And I can't, Djokovic, you could still argue is the best player, but in terms of whose year it was, like I say, I'm going for Alcaraz.
George, I suspect you're going to disagree, which is exactly what we like to hear.
I'm pretty torn on all 3, to be honest. I'm not discounting Rafa. I thought it was brilliant first half of the year. And, when we talk about looking back on years, quite often I look back on years just at who won the slams that year. And so winning 2 slams for me is a very, very significant achievement. And, he's won half of the biggest events. And I think at this stage in his career, that's all you can really ask for. And let's not forget, he reached the semis of Wimbledon where he got hit by injury again. I think he's had a very good year. Novak, I think there's an argument again. I think he's had a fantastic year in what he's been allowed to play. Probably the most consistent player of the year within what he's been able to play. Alcaraz, I'm probably having a bit of recency bias against him, which we can all be guilty of because he's not been so good since the US Open. So that that's harsh because there's been other people who've had bad spells as well. He was phenomenal for the first 6 months of the year. I've been a bit harsh. I might question his slam record a little bit if I was saying this is the best player of the year. Out 3rd round, Australia was it? Lost 4th at the French. Lost early-ish at Wimbledon. So he's won 1 slam. He's got world number 1, but there's big caveats there in terms of the other guys. So, yeah, I think there's cases for all. I probably will actually controversially go for Nadal because I think I would look back on the most slam wins in this particular isolated year. I think it goes Nadal, Novak, Alcaraz for me. But if you're asking me who's the best player, it'd be Novak, Alcaraz, Rafa. So there's some confusing rankings for you.
I think for me, I've just had a little bit more thought about it and why I think it's Alcaraz. It's that I don't think there's anything between those 3, and I'm going to have Alcaraz just because he played more. He was around more. But I think
feel like you're hoping Nick Kyrgios is listening and being like, no, but it doesn't count if you play more.
No, because I think that, for example, I know that like with the NBA, when they do their most valuable player voting, the players have to have played for 3/4 of the matches. And I think and I think that's a good way to look at it, I think. I don't think you can be player of the year if you only really played 50% of the year.
Mm. Yeah, and in the end, you're absolutely right. Like, the clues in the name, right? Like, player of the year. It's not who had the best second half of the year. Like, you're trying to take the whole year into account, George.
Can I just say as well that as far as I don't think I saw it if it was there, but I'm pretty sure this isn't actually a category in the ATP awards because they just give it to whoever's world number 1, whereas the WTA actually run it as a separate award. I see. So that's just another thing to kind of throw into.
I also want to pull George up on saying that Alcaraz had a great 6 months of the year. He won his slam in the 9th month.
No, but I think his form was better in the first 6 months of the year. I think he won the US Open when he wasn't playing as well as he had. Yeah. He still played pretty well. But
he went on that run in Miami and Madrid, that was just insane.
The clay was unreal, as well. He played some great stuff before the French.
Yeah, and also Sinner should have beaten the US Open.
Yeah. Well, he had 3, 4, 5 set matches in that tournament where he could easily have lost several of them.
Yeah, it's not fun if you don't get a 5 though. It's way more.
It's true.
So what we've got here is a vote for Alcaraz from Calvin, a vote for Nadal from George. Which leaves me with some power. Novak Djokovic.
Novak. It's a split. I think it is a 3-way tie.
I think it is, and I Novak Djokovic has only lost 7 matches this year. Okay, he's only played 49, but that is still a pretty high win percentage. 86% is pretty good, and I think that will be better than it's certainly better than Alcaraz's, and it is better than Nadal's as well. So. I'll tell you what, I'll make it a 3-way tie and we'll put it to the listeners. That's the only way we can solve these things. I mean, I don't say the listeners know everything. I know you guys know loads, probably more than us on most things, but I'm going to put it to the listeners.
You'll have to leave the 4th option for anyone brave enough to make the case for Casper Ruud.
I made a case for Casper Ruud being much better than I thought he was the other week, but I can't make it for the whole player of the year. Let's move on to most improved, where you could arguably put Casper Ruud. But we'll start with the WTA, where we've got 5 nominations. Veronika Kudermetova, Beatriz Haddad-Maia, Ekaterina Alexandrova, Lyudmila Samsonova, and Ayla Tomljanovic. George, you can start this time.
Can I just clarify something as well, so we're all on the same page on this? Okay. As the person who pulled these nominations together, I probably should have said this earlier, but the lists that I've given for these 2 are the nominations that the ATP and WTA put forward, and their criteria is someone who finished inside the top 100 and showed significant improvement throughout the season.
And when you say finished inside top 100, they could have finished inside the top 100 the previous year.
Yeah, so the newcomer is about new into the
Right,
top 100.
I see,
So you can just pick someone you thought was really improved. And I was considering going outside of this on the men's one. I'm going to take someone within the women's one. I think I'm going to go for Haddad Maia on this. I thought while she maybe didn't quite do it at the slams, she had some seriously good tennis over the summer, won a load of titles, had a really good win streak. And that was someone who I wasn't expecting to make that step up this year. So I think in a year where I was disappointed by a lot of the very best players, Swiatek aside, she definitely deserves a place in the conversation. So I'm going to take her.
Calvin, from that list of 5, have you got?
Give me the list. Just give me the list again, because I forgot one of them.
Kudermetova, Haddad Maia, Alexandrova, Samsonova, Tomljanovic. Listener Calvin has puffed his cheeks out.
Your 6th option is you can pick someone else you think is more dramatically improved than any of those, if you like. Because I mean, look, there is a case that you could say Swiatek.
I was just going to say that. I was going to say that. From where I was just going to say that to go from, last year she was somebody who was in the mix with a fair few others to dominating the game, or as close to it as we can, as we just discussed. That's more of an improvement for me than any of the ones who we've just listed, who you think, they go a little bit better. I'm going to say Swiatek.
Classic Calvin there, going off script as much as you possibly can by picking someone from outside the nominations.
By picking the most improved player.
I'm also going to go a bit left field, albeit I am going to pick someone nominated. Well, this is one of those things where it's a little bit sort of heart over head, in that I've seen Ayla Tomljanovic play a lot of really good matches this year, and I think she has added something. I mean, she's always had that, like, people call her a really strong competitor. Like, I think she's always had that. But I've watched matches that she's played, and like, her rally tolerance and her kind of tolerance for the big moment is really, really admirable. I mean, you look at her run at Wimbledon when she got to the quarters and she lost, having been a set up to Rybakina, she lost. But in that run, she beat Jill Teichmann, who is no slouch. She beat Barbara Krejcikova and Elise Cornet, both of which were from a set down. Like, I think she's quite different from the rest of the group. Not all of the rest of them, but I think she plays tennis. She's got brilliant rally tolerance, so physical, brilliant fitness, and incredible calmness in really big moments. Like, that Serena Williams match is without a doubt the most insane tennis atmosphere I've ever been in. Like, the US Open is a tough place to be at the best of times, but Serena Williams, Saturday night, like, 3rd set, you've just lost the tiebreak to go to a 3rd, and the whole of Arthur Ashe is begging for you to bugger off. And she just brought it, and she absolutely owned that final set. So I guess I don't know whether I would have thought Ayla Tomljanovic could have done that a year ago, and therefore I have to consider it a most improved kind of criteria. I mean, I appreciate that, she's not necessarily going to have made such a big jump in the rankings as other people might have done, but I do think she's earned it through the kind of timbre of those performances, to borrow a term from musicality. So again, we can put it to the listeners now that we have 3 nominations from our long list that have turned into a short list, and I've no doubt that they will disagree with me very, very highly on Tomljanovic, but that's what I'm going with. On to the ATP Most Improved. 4-man shortlist here. Carlos Alcaraz again, Maxime Cressy, Jack Draper, and Holger Rune. I mean, all very strong cases. Who wants to jump in? Calvin, I think I started with George last time, so you can go.
I'm down to, Alcaraz, I would say, he's gone from somebody who wasn't competing at slams really to winning one. Draper, you could say just purely on ranking jump, definitely. Rune, begrudgingly because I don't like him. But I might have to say Rune, if I'm honest, because he's improved more than I thought he would.
Yeah. It's the
Rune,
UTR thing of it expected, like it's the level that we thought they would be anyway, and then how they've exceeded that.
Yeah, I'll say Rune, to be fair. Just above Draper, I'll say Rune. Begrudgingly.
You're going to get an agreement from George on that one?
I actually was going to go for Alcaraz on this one. I just think on the grounds, I think when we talk about jumping in the rankings in every stage, like this guy's gone from outside the top 30 to world number 1. And I always say, like, it's easier to make that jump a lot further back than up. Like, I think he's jumped through about 6 very significant stages this year. And I know there's been other factors around it, but his level's also been absolutely phenomenal. It's always been good, but some of the levels he hit this year were really amazing. So to win a slam, become world number 1 from that position of, barely seeded from a slam, I think it's like a really, really tough gradient to climb, and one he's done really well on.
I'm going to make Calvin very unhappy and agree with him. Well, he's going to be torn because I'm agreeing with him, but also giving Holger Rune the Love Tennis award. I mean, there's a few stats that I looked at on the train home, actually, because it was just kind of the last thing I looked at, and that sort of summed it up for me. Before this season, Holger Rune had never won a match at a Masters, and he obviously ended the year by winning a Masters. He'd never won a match at a main draw of a Grand Slam, and he obviously made it to the quarterfinals of the French and gave Casper Ruud a pretty good go. And he was 103 this time last year, and he's now 11.
I'd say as well on Draper, and this is the opposite of a criticism of him, that I'm not sure how much he's improved in the last year, because exactly a year ago from this week or next week, myself and Luke, who I coach, did pre-season with Jack, did about 3 or 4 days with him, and he was awesome. Like then. I remember Jack hit a serve and I was stood on the side netting on the ad side. I'll sort of paint the picture for the listeners. I was stood on the netting on the ad side and Jack hit a wide serve that crossed me above my shoulder height. And to break a sideline on the side on the ad court and still have it rising so much that you can get it over the shoulder of a 6 foot tall man is some serve. So he's been amazing this year, but he already was a year ago. So yeah, that's why
how much improvement is that really? Yeah.
For Holger Rune, we're basically saying he was just crap a year ago. Which also makes a bit
no,
of a
I'm not saying
reductionist
that,
harshness.
Yeah, I'm not saying that. But look, if you go in the space, anybody who goes in the space in a year from outside the top 100 to, is he in the top 10?
He's 11.
Yeah, then that's that. You can't. The more I think about it, you can't argue it is him.
Yeah. Congratulations, Holger Rune. I know lots of people close to Holger Rune listen, so congratulations to everyone, Holger Rune especially. Let's move on to WTA Newcomer, where we've got, again, 6 women on this one. Tseng Fruhvirtova, I'm assuming that's Linda Fruhvirtova, rather than, because Brenda's not that highly ranked yet. Jewel Niemeyer, Maya Sharif, Harriet Dart, and Pigossi. So,
do you want the definition for this one? Should
do. So this is someone who was outside the top 100 and is now
So it's a player who made their top 100 debut and or notable accomplishments during the season.
Is that because one of them didn't make their top 100 debut or something, or is it just written weirdly?
So the one who's in there, I'm wondering if Niemeyer might have been already. I don't know.
Or
did Sharif? She maybe came back in. Yeah, Sharif had come back in.
There you go. That explains that. Who have you got, George?
I was going to take our British slant on this and go for Harriet Dart because I can't believe some of the wins she's had this year, given her limitations, and I think that speaks absolute volumes to how hard she's worked. Dart, to be honest, should not be able to reach like the 4th round of Indian Wells. She shouldn't. It's a real achievement. She's made the top 100. And it's an amazing achievement to be beating top 10 players at Grand Slams at the US Open, to back up 3 or 4 other top 20 wins this year. I think she's done incredibly well. And I think that's that's been a theme of her every year, that I've been surprised by something she's done. Not many players keep surprising me. And I think she's, while I think there's still massive holes in the game, the improvement to get to the level she's got to this year compared to last has been great, and the results are there to show for it. So well done to her.
I'm going to go, again, it's probably a little bit of just like, what's the availability heuristic, where like I've seen her play quite a bit this year and been very impressed just in the flesh. And I apologise, as I always do, especially with Chinese names, saying, I think
it's Harriet Dart. No.
It's Tseng Xin Wen. I think that's how it's pronounced. I'm going to try and work on these when I get the chance to do so. She's just, she's just been great, and she's had career best results at all the Grand Slams. She's won matches at each of the Grand Slams. She got to the quarterfinal in Canada as well. I think she's just good to watch, and like Chinese tennis it's kind of amazing. Chinese tennis has had its worst ever year in terms of events hosted because they haven't hosted any, and yet it's probably, it has had its best ever year in terms of players. They've now got, I think, 2 players inside the top 100 in the men's game, which they've never had even one before. They've obviously got quite a few girls, Wang Shiyu, Wang Xinyu, Tseng as well, breaking into the top 50. And I think it's quite an interesting story, and I think she's been a real leader. And I also loved when she talked about how she lost a match because she had really bad period pains, and like it takes a huge amount of like bravery to do that, especially coming, she obviously was born and raised in China, where I think things like that are even more taboo. And it is quite a male-dominated society, and you wouldn't talk about that stuff publicly. So, I always try and take off-court stuff into account, and I thought that was really impressive. And I think she's a great player, and there's going to be a lot of good Chinese players flying around in the next 5 years. And I don't know if she's the best one, but she might well end up being that. So that's my choice. Calvin, Tseng, Fruitova, Niemeyer, Sharif, Dart, Pigosi. Where are you going to go?
I was going to take Tseng as well. Again, probably similar along the lines. I've not seen a load of some of those players, and I've seen a few matches of hers, and I've always been impressed. I think we'll see her go a bit higher next year as well.
You lot are ganging up on me today. On my side for anything.
I'll try and get behind you.
I guess it's in fairness, like it's hard for me to see Harriet Dart as a newcomer.
Yeah,
because I guess in the line of work that I work in,
was that what it's called? Yeah, yeah. I suppose it's called newcomer. Fair point.
Right, ATP newcomer, where it's also going to be hard for Calvin to pick Jack Draper, because he's not remotely new, but I assume it's the same definition, someone getting into the top 100 for the first time, George.
I think the ATP haven't caveated it, so it's just they've gone purely for top 100 first time in 2022 and then made the biggest impact on the tour.
Right, okay. The nominations are Jack Draper, Yuri Hetcher, Ben Shelton, Chun Sin Tseng, and Holger Rune, who we've already talked about. I realise I haven't made myself go first at any point, but I'm quite happy to go first this time because I'm pretty convinced that the answer here is Jack Draper. Because, yes, we've all known about him and known that he has the ability to do this stuff, but he's gone and done it on a really big stage multiple times and massively impressed. And I think he is an absolutely worthy player where is he even ranked now? He's something like 39 or something in the world, I think he is. 42, there you go. And I think he's absolutely worthy of that. Like he complete. If you look at the guys around him, Emil Rusevori, John Isner, Sebastian Baez, and Arthur Rinderknecht, they're the guys ranked around him. You absolutely say he belongs to that company, and you'd actually expect him to beat quite a few of those. You'd be surprised if he loses in certain circumstances. So, yeah, I kind of have to go for him. I think he's going to be top 20 by this time next year, if not better. So, Calvin, why don't you go next?
Yeah, it's Draper for sure. There's no question about that. Just George is shaking his head there.
George, who you got? What have you got in your locker here?
Well, I think Holger Rune wins this one as a player who's never been in the top 100 before making the biggest impact.
Can't give him 2.
Can't pick twice.
No, but the thing
but
is,
I was booting him down the list because Alcaraz was the most improved.
No, you can go. You can say that he's. I'd argue again that he's not Newcomer because I'm not listening to those, the wording of it. But he was around the top 100. Like Jack was nowhere near the top 100. He was like outside the top 200 this time last year. You can't say Newcomer's anybody who's started the year in the top 100. He was like 101 a year ago. Like it's barely out of it. Like you can't. I'm not even qualifying Rune for that because he was there or thereabouts at the time.
Well, all right. I'll pick Rune because he was qualified and has had an amazing season on his top 100 debut. So I'll pick him under the seriousness of the definitions. But I also wanted to say Draper's been awesome. So I'm not upset you've gone for him.
Okay, very good. Let's move on to comebacks. Loads of great stories here, of course. Tough one, I think, particularly the WTA, because they're all great stories. I think all deserve their own sort of moment in the limelight. But Daria Saville, Tatiana Maria, Serena Williams, ever heard of her, and Donna Vekic are the 4 that are up for comeback. George, who have you gone for?
Really torn on this one. I think they're all quite good stories. I'm actually going to rule Serena out because I don't think her comeback was that good. So
yeah, I think that might be an engagement pick from the WTA social team, to be honest.
Yeah, I think Serena will probably win this, but her comeback wasn't that great, and I'm not entirely sure what she was coming back from this year beyond just like not being asked to play and retiring. So, like, do you know what I mean? Like, so she's out. I think there's a bit of a case for Vekic. She had that knee injury that kept her out for 3 months. She drops out the top 100. She come back in, done well. But I'm probably gonna go for Tatiana Maria. I think I really like her story. Someone who's gone away.
What is her story for people who don't know it?
So she went away from the sport again for the summer of 2020 to 2021. Gave birth to a second child. She won the title in Bogota, coming through as a qualifier to win her second career title and first since 2018. And then, of course, reached the semi-finals of Wimbledon. Like, that's a pretty cool story. And yeah, I don't think she's been perfect all year, but if we're talking about a comeback from,
yeah,
to do something you'd only done once before and then to reach a Grand Slam semi-final, that's a pretty cool story to me.
Yeah. I find it hard to disagree with that, actually. I'm quite annoyed you picked her because I now have to agree with you for the first time this evening.
Calvin can take Serena and you can be on my side for once.
But yeah, no, I mean, seriously, we talk a lot about how childbirth is the biggest physical challenge that any athlete will ever have to go through, and only 50% of athletes have to do it. To come back from that and get back to a level, and in her case, go beyond a level is... And she's 35 years old, by the way. Like, she's, which is not young in tennis terms, and she's got 2 kids under her belt, which she travels on tour with, and I think her husband is her coach, and they're just a great family unit. It's such fun. I remember seeing them, pushing a pram around at Wimbledon and stuff, and it's pretty cool. And, I'm not a woman, so I can't say she's a role model, but it's cool I would imagine, for people who think or worry that having kids ends your career. Tatiana Maria does not agree. Calvin?
I'll make it unanimous, yeah. I think it's...
excellent and brief.
Couldn't let me have a win, could you, Calvin? Couldn't let me have a
win. Right, ATP comeback. Borna Coric, Dominic Thiem, Stan Wawrinka, and, with apologies for pronunciation, Wu Yibing. I believe Jerry, they call him in Florida where he trains, so I might stick with that.
I wonder who George is picking here.
I'm actually going to surprise you and not pick him.
Oh, right.
As good as his comeback's been, I'm going to go for Coric, actually.
Okay.
I think his comeback was so cool. Like, he'd just basically been absolutely cropped and then just goes and wins. Was it Cincinnati or straight out of nowhere? Or was it Toronto? I can't remember which one it was now. I think it was Cincinnati. Just bombed through and had some incredible wins, winning a Masters title, first Masters. That's pretty cool. comeback story for a guy who's had a lot of injury problems.
And it was a good Cincinnati as well. He beat Nadal, Felix, and Stefanos. Like it wasn't one of those.
Yeah.
It wasn't the Jack Sock Paris Masters.
Just beat them.
Yeah. Calvin.
Yeah, I think it's Koric as well. Yeah, I think that's a pretty easy one. Be some good ones, Teams actually, especially in the later part of the year, he's had some nice results. Wawrinka pulled out some big ones, but it's Coric really in terms of things won, consistency, and players beaten. It's Coric in that he had a real tough ride, especially the way he plays. If you have physical injury issues when your game is based on physicality and movement, it's tough to come back from that. Yeah. And yeah, fair play to him. Really strong comeback.
Okay. I wanted to potentially say Stan Wawrinka because I think to do it at his age is very impressive. But the reality is he's played some good matches and not actually had that many particularly good results on the biggest stage. So quite hard to give it to him. But I wanted to give him a mention anyway. I do agree with you, lads. I think Borna Coric is probably the right answer here, despite my Stanisms. Right, we're on to the Coach of the Year segment, and we've got precious little time to do it in. WTA nominations... Whit Pegula, Wiktorowski Świątek, Martinez Kasatkina, Jalali Jabeur, Peret Garcia, Goff Moyano Goff, Pacirano Haddad Maya, and Hill, our very own Tom Hill, and Maria Sakkari. George, I know this award, the other award awarded by the Women's Tennis Association, whoever they are, has caused some controversy. But who are you going to go for?
Well, I suppose there's always an argument about whoever I think is the most improved should have the coach one as well. So, there's a case for Haddad Maya.
Yeah.
But I do think the genuine improvements I've seen in Swiatek's game imply to me, and the difficulties in improving at that top level actually imply to me there is some decent coaching going on in there. So I'm going to go for a guy, Wiktorowski, I think. Honourable mention for Jabor's coach as well, because she's had a great year as well and improved a lot.
Yeah, I think that was one of those things where Issam Shalali is his name, George, where I looked at Jabeur last year and thought, I don't really see how much better her game gets, and it has. And so there's some credit to be given there. I also think Daria Kasatkina has really surprised me in what she's done, and when you also consider everything that Daria Kasatkina has been through this year, she sort of came out. I apologise for the clumsiness of that phrase, but people were aware that she was part of the LGBTQ community before, and then she kind of talked about it more publicly, and has been sharing her relationship online a lot, and that's actually been very sweet. And has also, by the way, been living away from her home country, which is currently at war, and is a place where it's basically illegal to be gay. So I think to be the person running along with her on that sense is pretty big.
I meant to say, actually, it's probably something that was worth discussing. I don't know whether you guys or any of the listeners saw, but doubles player called Fabian Raboul came out as gay this week, and apparently he's the first actively gay male player in the top 100. Is
that the case? That's incredible. I didn't know that at all. How do you spell that, Calvin?
Fabian of Fabian, and then Reboul with I believe he's in a relationship with another French player.
All right, okay. Well, good for him. That's great news.
It's a good story.
Yeah, terrific. More on that as we know more about it, because that is genuine news to me. But I'm really pleased to hear it, and not an easy thing to do either, especially on the men's tour. But equally, it's not easy to do on the women's tour because, as I say, it's basically illegal to be gay in Russia, so not particularly nice to be like that and go through that while you're working on the tour. But I think it's a big boon to her coach that she's able to do that. Right, let's move on to ATP Coach of the Year, which I've muted Calvin for, and it's not deliberate. I was like, no, he can't have you on this. But as you know, Calvin is our Love Tennis Coach of the Year, but we have to do an ATP top 100 Coach of the Year in singles as well. Let's say that's how we're getting around the technicalities of it. We've got Ferrero with Alcaraz, Fontang with Felix Auger-Aliassime, Ivanisevic with Djokovic, Russell with Fritz, and Ruud with Ruud, who has his father in his corner. Calvin, you may start.
I think it is Casper Ruud's dad. I think in terms of expectation and outcome, I think that would be my choice, because you wouldn't have expected him to have as good a year as he's had, and he did.
George?
Yeah, I agree, actually. And I do think Ruud's game has genuinely improved quite significantly from when I've seen him last year to this. So, yeah, great work for the family coach.
It's difficult, isn't it? From the outside, it's always hard to, Calvin, you always say it's sort of 10% is the most you can offer, but, from the outside, you're always guessing a little bit as well. But, yeah, I think hard to disagree with that, especially as, I don't know how much Ivanisevic really is Djokovic's coach. He's there. But
he's had a few of those, Djokovic, hasn't he? Because Becker, I always think, everybody heard Becker was the same, and I guess similar with Murray and Lendl. There's a lot of talk of people don't really know what Lendl offers to that.
Well, he's not there quite a lot of the time.
Yeah.
When Lendl started working with him again this time around, he literally wasn't there for the first 3 weeks. He was just basically emailing. Yeah.
I would say at least in Ivanisevic's defence that Vida's not around anymore.
No, that's true.
That was the main man.
Yeah,
I do think Ivanisevic probably has taken on a lot more than Becker was in those days, as was shown by what happened when Becker left versus what happened when Vida left. So
yeah,
the fact he's bridged that gap is probably a feather in his cap.
Well, we've done really well to get through all of that. We have 2 more things on our list, and we would like to do them properly, I think. So I think we're going to hang them over to next week, because there is actually, in the biggest disappointment, there is also a lot of conversation to be had, which I'd like to bring in a couple of listener questions. Remember, if you want to get in touch by email, you can do so, lovetennispod@gmail.com. You can also tweet us at lovetennispod, or send us DMs, just me, James Gray Sport, or Bellshaw George, or Cal Betton, as we all are on Twitter. Most importantly, please do come back and listen again next week.
Social Podcast Network.
Geico asks, how would you love a chance to save some money on insurance? Of course you would. And when it comes to great rates on insurance, Geico can help. Like with insurance for your car, truck, motorcycle, boat, and RV. Even help with homeowners or renters coverage. Plus, add an easy-to-use mobile app, available 24-hour roadside assistance, and more, and Geico is an easy choice. Switch today and see all the ways you could save. It's easy. Simply go to geico.com or contact your local agent today.